Hey there, my name is Terry with Tree Marie Soapworks, and this is a little different. This is not cold processed soap, it's actually transparent soap. I've been wanting to make this for over 2 years now, so once this challenge came along, I was in. This is my experience with the soap challenge for the month of September of 2021. It's hosted by Amy Warden, and this month we had a guest teacher. Her name is Aruna Padmanabhan with Suffuse. And just a little note, I'm not going to be giving any amounts in this video. If you would like to purchase the recipe, you can find it through the soap challenge. I will give information for Amy with the soap challenge and Aruna. And also I got a lot of good information from Edgar Kameraki, and that will be in the information below too. Okay, let's get started. Here we are with our first ingredient. It's extra virgin coconut oil, and you want to use the extra virgin because it will be much more clear. If you use the regular coconut oil, you will find that your results will be a little more yellow. Lauric and myristic are the main fatty acids in coconut oil, and they contribute to the hardness of the bar and also the cleansing. The next ingredient is stearic acid. Stearic acid is a very hard saturated fat, and we're using this really hard fat with a high melting point because you're going to be adding other ingredients to this that are liquid. And also when you remelt, melt and pour, you usually add fragrance and other things. So we want to start with a really hard base. If you're familiar with the process of soap making, you know that there's always the fats that react with a sodium hydroxide by way of water or some other liquid. So think of the coconut oil and stearic acid as the fats to mix with the water and lye to make the soap. And think of all the other ingredients as additives to perform a certain function, but they don't actually make the soap itself. Isopropyl alcohol is the next ingredient, and the best one to use is the highest percentage you can get. So 99% is the best. And the reason is because if you get the 91 or the 70%, you are dealing with more water, and more water will make your soap more cloudy. The alcohol in the soap performs the function of a solvent. It helps the soap crystals to dissolve. The next ingredient is distilled water, and that is just the way that we get the sodium hydroxide to dissolve and react with the stearic acid and the coconut oil to make soap. Here we have the sodium hydroxide, and that is added to the water. It is a caustic ingredient that needs to be handled with care, so make sure you understand the proper safety precautions when using sodium hydroxide. The next ingredient is glycerin. Glycerin is used for a few reasons. One of them is that it adds moisture to the bar, and that helps because we had a 0% super fat, because we don't want any of those fats left over because they would cause the bar to be cloudy. So that counteracts that, but it's a solvent and it helps to dissolve those opaque soap crystals and makes them transparent so that the light can pass through them. The next ingredient is cocoa betaine. It is an ingredient that helps increase the lather, especially if you have hard water. It's an optional ingredient. A lot of people couldn't find it. I found it at a place called Making Cosmetics. Thanks to someone in the soap challenge, they turned us on to where we could find it here in the US. This surfactant is derived from coconut oil. The next ingredient is sodium lactate. Sodium lactate is a natural ingredient. This is used to make a harder bar and also to make it last longer. There are humectant properties to it. It doesn't really add moisture to your skin, but it pulls moisture from the atmosphere, therefore it causes your soap to sweat. So of course these soaps, just like any other melt and pour, need to be wrapped. You can either use plastic wrap or you can use shrink wrap. The next ingredient is fine granulated sugar, and that is pure sugar. It doesn't have any other ingredients in it. And we will be dissolving that in more distilled water, so I'm going to be adding the water directly to the sugar. The sugar water in this recipe is used as a solvent. Next we enter into the action phase. Everything's measured, and now we just need to get that sugar dissolved in the water. Okay, no problem, we can do that. What is it that we need to worry about when we're dissolving sugar? Sugar scorches really easily, so you need to keep that mixture moving. And when you do let it sit to heat up a little bit more, you need to keep an eye on it. And don't ever let it sit for too long. You got to keep it moving. For this, I brought it to a boil for a few seconds and then just checked to make sure the crystals were gone, and you just take it off heat and set this aside for later. I wanted to tell you that it can be dangerous to make this on a stove. Make sure that you don't have any open flames. Never use a gas stove. There's alcohol involved in this and it's very flammable, so you don't want an open flame. For this one, I'm using my induction stove, but turns out I'm not very comfortable with it, and I made a few mistakes in this round, so you'll just have to hang with me for my trial and error. Again, this is my first time making transparent soap from scratch. I saw in the troubleshooting of the Facebook group that goes along with this challenge that people were having some crystal formation in their final loaf. So I think it's important to get these crystals dissolved or make sure none of them get through into the final product. The next step is to melt the stearic acid and the coconut oil. Stearic acid has a high melting point, 156 degrees Fahrenheit and 69 degrees Celsius. So we need to get this melted and it has to be completely clear. Next, I take it off the heat and I whisk in the isopropyl alcohol. Once that frosts a bit, we set this aside and get ready to make our lye solution. The next ingredients we add together are the distilled water and the sodium hydroxide. Remember always to add the sodium hydroxide to the distilled water and not the other way around. This lye solution is made just like any other lye solution, except if you're familiar with my regular videos, when I make cold processed soap, I use cold distilled water and I use ice cubes. For this, we don't need cold distilled water or ice cubes. We're using the temperature to our advantage. We want to keep this fairly warm actually. So room temperature distilled water is preferred in this case. Once everything is dissolved, set that aside. I would recommend covering it with something so that it doesn't lose too much heat. And also keep it in an area that's not going to get disturbed and an area that's well ventilated, because there are some fumes that happen when you mix these two ingredients together. The next step is to get your stearic acid, coconut oil, and isopropyl alcohol combination heated back up. We're trying to get it to around 70 to 75 degrees Celsius. Now I'm using Celsius instead of Fahrenheit because the recipe is given in Celsius and that just makes it easier. This handy infrared thermometer really helps. You can just change back and forth. Okay, the temperature has reached 75 degrees Celsius. Now it's time to add the lye water into the oils. Here's the point where things started to go wrong. It wasn't really wrong, but it was just due to my inexperience. I didn't know how to handle things. The recommendation if you're running your air conditioner or you just have cooler ambient temperature was to keep your mixture around 70 to 75 degrees Fahrenheit. And I think it would have worked better if I worked a little warmer. Also, another one of my errors was that my lye solution was cooler than my oil solution. So when I added it, it instantly solidified. It looked like slush, like melted snow in water. So it was sort of gelatinous, and when I mixed it up, it wouldn't really dissolve. So I tried to work it out and I tried heating it back up on the stovetop, but later I realized that my stovetop wasn't plugged in, so it wasn't heating back up. At this point, I just added the rest of the ingredients and put it in the mold and put it in the fridge. I thought my first batch was ruined and I knew I had enough ingredients to make another batch. So I went ahead and experimented with the first batch and I remelted it and got it up to a higher temperature and everything went pretty good. You can see the results here. I still thought I could do better and I still thought that the batch came out a little bit on the yellow side. So here we go for the second try. I did some troubleshooting in the Soap Challenge Facebook group and also got some advice from Edgar Kameraki, and I found one of his videos really helpful, which I will link below. From all of that, I decided to try this round in the microwave. I'm just much more comfortable using the microwave. I started by making my sugar solution, so I just measured the water and the sugar, and then I microwaved that for a total of 3 minutes. I did stir in between, and the wattage of my microwave is 1,000 watts, so you may need to adjust times depending on the wattage of your microwave. While that was microwaving, I went ahead and measured the extra virgin coconut oil and the stearic acid. After microwaving the sugar solution for 2 minutes, here's what it looks like. I went ahead and used the mini mixer to mix it in, and then I gave it another minute and it turned out just fine. Here's a look at what the sugar solution looks like after it's been microwaved a total of 3 minutes. It looks pretty good. I'm going to set it aside and go ahead and get my stearic acid and coconut oil melted. I set that for 2 minutes in the microwave, and in the meantime I'm going to be measuring some other ingredients, starting with the isopropyl alcohol. Next, I measure the two ingredients we need for the lye solution. That's the distilled water and the sodium hydroxide. After 2 minutes in the microwave, this is what the coconut oil and stearic acid looks like. I'm going to go ahead and give it another 1 minute. In the meantime, I'm going to measure some other ingredients, starting with the glycerin, and then the cocoa betaine, and then finally the sodium lactate. That will do it for all the ingredients except for some isopropyl alcohol later and also some liquid colorant. After a total of 3 minutes in the microwave, I added the isopropyl alcohol to the coconut oil and stearic acid combination. In case you're wondering, I added the alcohol off camera and whisked it, and you can see the results. There's a frothiness on the top. Next, it's time to make the lye solution. I added the sodium hydroxide to the distilled water, and I'm just mixing it until it's dissolved, and I put it in a well-ventilated area, but this time I'm covering it, or mostly covering it, because I want to maintain that heat a little more than last time. You get the idea. You've seen me do this hundreds of times, right? So let's just get it dissolved, be careful, and set it aside. And on to the next step. Here we have the coconut oil stearic acid isopropyl alcohol combination, and I'm just checking the temperature. I microwaved it again until it reached the temperatures between 75 and 85 degrees Celsius, and then I strained in the lye solution. The mixture got a bit cloudy again, but as I stirred it, it cleared back up, and now I know that all I have to do is raise the temperature when that kind of thing happens. Once I get everything mixed well, I just cover the mixture and I'm setting the timer for 5 minutes. This is a technique I kind of adapted from one of Edgar Kameraki's videos. It helps if you think of this process as hot process soap instead of cold process. Think of this part as the cook. During the cook is when the saponification happens, and because this is at a higher temperature than normal, the saponification is happening a little faster than normal. After the 5 minutes has passed, it formed a little film on top, so I'm going to microwave it again to get it in between the 75 and 85 degrees Celsius. And then at that point, I'm going to do another 5 minutes covered. In the meantime, I'm going to heat up some of the other additives. I'm going to heat up the glycerin to 65 degrees and the rest of the ingredients to around 90 degrees. That's the end of the second 5-minute rest, and now I'm going to check the pH. I'm looking for numbers between 8 and 9, somewhere around there. To test the pH, I put some distilled water in a beaker, and then I add a few drops of my soap, and I stir that up really well and dip in a pH strip. And the pH is reading between 8 and 9, which is pretty good. So I'm not going to do any more rounds of microwaving and resting. But if my pH was higher, I would go ahead and microwave it again to get the temperatures between 75 and 85 degrees Celsius, and then cover it and let it rest for another 5 minutes and try the test again. Time to add the other ingredients. This is the sodium lactate. Next, I'm checking the temperature of the glycerin. I see it's 58 degrees Celsius. I want that to be around 65 degrees Celsius, so I'm warming that up a bit. In the meantime, I'm going to add the cocoa betaine. It has a little film on the top of it, which stuck to the spoon, and so I'm not really worried about the cocoa betaine that was on the spoon, and I'm just going to add it. Cocoa betaine was an optional ingredient, so if we put in a few grams less because of what stuck to the spoon, no big deal. The next ingredient I'm going to add is the glycerin, and then once that's added, I will add the sugar solution. Again, I have to microwave that and get it up to a good temperature, which is around 90 degrees. Okay, my temp is up to 90 degrees Celsius, and now I'm going to give it one final blend and use my fine mesh strainer to strain it into the soap solution. This is one of my favorite parts. This is where you try to correct the color. It's looking a little bit yellow, so I think that came from the sugar solution, but I want to correct that and make it to a very clear color. And I'm using this water-soluble violet color that is from Elements Bath & Body. You can add purple or blue colorant to melt and pour to get it to become a little more of a clear color to correct the yellowness of it. So here we go, we're going to use violet and we're going to add a drop at a time just to see. I've put everything on a white bottom just to make sure that we're going for the good clear color, and I'm trying not to overdo it, but I have a little trick here. I used a piece of plastic that I cut from a milk carton that's completely white. I put it in the mixture and I can see that it's still a little bit on the yellow side, so I needed to just keep correcting it until I get a clear color and nothing shows up on that white piece of plastic. I ended up adding 7 drops of this violet colorant. I microwaved it one more time just because I don't like it to form a film after I pour it, and then when I walk to the fridge it gets a little messed up. So I microwaved it warm enough to not form a film, and then I put it in the fridge for about 3 hours, I suppose, before I took it out, because I didn't want it to get completely cold, but I wanted it to get cold enough to where it's set. The longer you keep it in the fridge, I think the more condensation you'll have later on, so I took it out just once it was very set. Here we have the next day. I'm taking it out of the mold and then I'm going to cut it into 1-inch bars. I'll show you the clarity. I feel like it looks a little bit on the purple side when you look at the whole thing, but when you cut it into the bar you can see that that trick worked with using that piece of white plastic to gauge how clear it's going to be. The first bar had a lot of bubbles on the end, so I cut another bar to see the clarity. I'm pretty happy with the way it came out. It looks to me like it's still maybe a tinge yellow, but I really am excited about the clarity of this bar and this recipe. Next we come to the remelting and the coloring of this soap, and I'm going to show you how I got the ombre effect. I used an acrylic column mold for this, and to prepare the mold you have to cover the bottom with plastic wrap and then you add the tray and then it's all set to go. The recipe that I got from the Soap Challenge Club makes a little over 3 pounds of soap, and I had experimented with some of the soap, but with the remaining that I had left I wanted to make 3 different colors. So I divided that amount that I had left by 3 and I got 235 grams per color. And we'll start with the first color, which is going to be turquoise. First I cube my soap and I cut it into meltable sizes, and then I microwave it in small increments, no more than 30 seconds for this amount because it does melt rather quickly. I'm going for temperatures around 55 degrees Celsius or 131 degrees Fahrenheit. This is my turquoise water-soluble liquid colorant from Elements Bath & Body. All the colorants that I'm using today are from Elements Bath & Body. When I get the temperature around 131 degrees Fahrenheit or a little bit more, or 155 degrees Celsius, I pour about 70% of my batter. You can see I'm straining it in through a fine mesh strainer. And once I get that desired amount poured, I spray it with isopropyl alcohol to pop any bubbles. For the final layer, I just want this to float on top, and I'm going to try to get it to mix slightly in between those 2 layers, but I'm trying to create the ombre effect. And you can do that with transparent soap by adding alcohol. The idea is that each layer has a little more alcohol, which makes it float on top of the previous layer. So for the first layer you don't add any alcohol, and then the second layer you would add 1%, or in this case, since I'm only adding 1 layer, I'm going to add 2%. Keep in mind that this is a new technique for me and I really need more experimentation, but you can experiment as well. I figured I had about 85 grams of batter left, and so I had to figure 2% of that. 2% of that is 1.7 grams. Convert that to milliliters, 1.7 milliliters. So I ended up using about 1.5 milliliters for this, and I also added my colorant. And for these I didn't use any fragrance because I just wasn't ready for that, and I didn't really want to make the bar any softer. For this technique you have to start with a really hard base because you're adding that isopropyl alcohol, and it's going to get softer and softer with each additional percentage of isopropyl alcohol that you add. For this blue colorant, I use 3 drops, and I'm going to strain it in, but before I do that, I'm going to just take off that top skin that forms so there won't be a line in between my layers. It actually just stuck to my glass rod rather nicely, so I could just pull it out pretty easily. Okay, now it's time to strain in the blue, and I do this very carefully and I try to pour it from as low as I possibly can. I will give you a look at how it went. I ended up pouring down the wire to not have it break through the surface, and when I looked at it, my reaction is I think I needed to do more clear. So in the next batch, I'm going to make the clear part 80% and the top part only 20%. I kind of like this look, but I really always wanted to do this in a ombre effect, so I used my clay needle tool that's used in ceramics, and I just kind of manipulated that layer, and I was trying to get the layer that's in between to mix and get that ombre look. When I was happy with how it looked, I covered it and just left it there until the next day. So for the next day, to take it out of the mold, I have this square acrylic piece that I put inside, and I use this PVC pipe and push it down on the pipe and it'll come out the other end. I'm going to be cutting these square bars in half vertically, but I'm not going to do that until I'm ready to photograph them and also wrap them. So I'm saving that until I have all 3 colors done. Okay, I've skipped the pour part for the clear batter. I poured 80% of the batter, and now I'm just going to warm up the remaining batter slightly and color that. And I used grass green for this one. It's called grass green liquid colorant, and I love this color. I actually wish I would have put 1 more drop in. Next, to get that color to float on top, I have to add the isopropyl alcohol. So for this one, my 2% ended up being 1 milliliter. Once everything was mixed well, I removed the skin from the previous layer and I poured in the green layer. Then I manipulated it with that ceramic tool, and I think this one came out with the best ombre of all of the 3 colors I did. Here's a look at what it looks like from the side. Now we're skipping ahead to the last batch, the orange, and this is just colored with orange water-soluble colorant. We use the same technique, 80% clear on the bottom, 20% orange on the top, and the 2% isopropyl alcohol, which was 1 milliliter. You can see that I modified my little strainer. I had those wires stuck in there. It just wasn't working. They were electrical wires. They weren't stiff enough, so I used clothesline wire and adapted that, and that's going to work much better. Again, I removed the skin on top before pouring, and then I poured it through the strainer. Here's a look at what it looks like from the side. I just love this look. If I wasn't doing ombre for this, I would just keep it the way it is. And I think sometime in the future, I will experiment with jets of color like this. And here's how it turned out after I manipulated the layers. And now the fun part, I love this part, cutting the soap. I saved these soaps to cut at the end because I didn't know if any condensation would form on any of them. I wanted to keep them out of any air or humidity, so I covered them up right away after unmolding them. Here we are with the first cut, and enjoy the rest of these cuts. I really enjoyed this experience with making this transparent soap, and I hope to get back to it. And like I said, I really want to experiment with the jets of color coming in, maybe different colors in the same batch. I don't know. But this technique just is fascinating, and so if that's something you would want to see in the future, let me know. I will always be mostly concentrating on cold process soap, but a few of these kind of experiments mixed in might be fun. Thank you for sharing my newbie experience with my first time making transparent soap. If you're new to my channel, please subscribe and hit the bell for notifications for the next time I post a video. Thank you again to Amy Warden, Aruna Padmanabhan, and Edgar Kameraki. It has been a wonderful experience. That's it for this time. Thank you for joining me, and I will see you back here next time.